Hi, and welcome to another episode of About the Authors TV. I'm your host, Jake Brown. The Romantic Times once mused that when it comes to providing gritty and sexy stories, Lisa Jackson certainly knows how to deliver. And whether talking about the Maverick series, featuring He's a Bad Boy, He's Just a Cowboy, He's a Rich Boy, and He's My Soldier Boy, or the Dark Jewel trilogy with Dark Ruby, Dark Sapphire, and Dark Emerald, which the Literary Times hailed as a richly crafted novel of the highest caliber. The Forever Family series, featuring a family kind of girl, a family kind of guy, and a family kind of wedding, before transitioning into romantic suspense, kicking off with the long-running New Orleans series, co-starring detectives Rick Benson and Ruben Montoya, where mystery suspense reviews rave that the characters, the sultry New Orleans backdrop, all contribute to the suspense in the novels, which included Hot-Blooded, Cold-Blooded, Shiver, Absolute Fear, Lost Souls, Malice, Devious, Never Die Alone, and The Last Sinner. The popular Savannah series that included The Night Before, The Morning After, Tell Me, and The Third Grave, where Suspense magazine praised Jackson as on the top of her game. Jackson's hit streak continued with the McCafferty series, co-starring Thorne, Matt, Slade and Randy, and Best Kept Lies. The medieval trilogy including Impostress, Temptress, and Sorceress. The wildly popular To Die series set in Montana and featuring Left to Die, Chosen to Die, Born to Die, Afraid to Die, Ready to Die, Deserves to Die, Expecting to Die, The Girl Who Survived, and Willing to Die. Jackson would next team up with her sister, fellow best-selling author Nancy Bush, to co-write the Wicked series over the course of Wicked Game, Wicked Lies, Something Wicked, Wicked Ways, and Wicked Dreams, where the Library Journal waxed that combining their considerable talents, sisters Jackson and Bush had penned a chilling thriller with enough false leads to keep readers enthralled to the finish. Winner of both the Romantic Times Viewer's Choice Award and the Romantic Times Career Achievement Award for Romantic Suspense, with over 20 million copies of Jackson's books in print in 20 languages around the world. Lisa stays as busy as ever these days, but takes out time today to talk about her beloved career and catalog. Thanks so much for being here. How prevalent were books around your house growing up in rural Oregon?
I grew up in the 50s in rural Oregon, so there wasn't all of the media, all of anything that it is today. There were 3 channels on TV, and we, the kids, were the remotes. So my family was big readers, and we all read mysteries kind of. And my parents yes, I remember sitting on Dad's lap, and he would read the silly little poems from the Red Book, but everybody read, and uh, I remember every Christmas and everything, there was always books under the table. I started reading Nancy Drew and the Black Stallion. There wasn't the proliferation of children's books that there are now, but I enjoyed stories. I enjoyed being in my own head in fantasy, and I remember writing a book. We got to write in 6th grade, and I just went on and on and on and on and on. So yeah, I've always been into books, into stories. TV, I'm into the stories. Yeah.
Now, you have a pretty cool story about how you first dared to flex your creative wings in college a little, if you care to share.
Yes, in high school, I kind of did poetry, not serious poetry, silly poetry, but I did have Mrs. Ekus, who was also my Latin teacher, and she was a stickler, about this tall. You didn't argue with Faye Ekus, let me tell you. And she encouraged me. If I can think of anybody who encouraged me, then I went to college in the 70s, and I had took creative writing. I guess maybe I was required. And I had one teacher, and they gave me some assignment that I thought, I can't do this. So rebel that I was, I just wrote down, and I said, this is creative writing, and I can't be creative with something you force me to write. So the teacher, who was in a motorcycle jacket and very anti-establishment, the next day says, well, we have one student who thought she was uh, inhibited by my subject matter. So I'd like to read what Miss Pedersen said. And he read my 2 lines. And then he said, I'd feel so much better if Miss Pedersen said, I feel chained to my chair. On and on and on. So he was inspiring too, I guess.
Montana Press would muse years after the dawn of your career that with 85 romantic suspense novels under her belt, how does best-selling author Lisa Jackson keep creating those dynamic plots and compelling characters that keep us turning our collective pages? The short answer, she now lives to write, just as she once wrote to live. What's the true story on your initial motivation to take a shot at writing your first novel?
Okay, the real scoop is an amalgam of that. 1980, and it was Time Magazine had an article about romance writers. And my sisters and I both each separately read the article. And my sister, who is also an author, Nancy Bush, says to me, "I think we can write this." And I said, "No, you're crazy. We have never read a romance novel in our lives. We only write mystery novels. I mean, we only read mystery novels. And as much as I dreamed of being a writer, and she was a nutritionist, and we both worked in banking, and I was babysitting at the time," she said, "Well, I think we could do it." And we were with another friend, I think. Anyway, I went to my next job the next day, babysitting all day long while my husband was working, and we were broke, broke, broke. And I thought, who am I to say no? So I pulled out and it was a manual typewriter, which I don't know if anybody knows what they are anymore. And the only paper we had was, are you familiar with what Roman meal bread looks like? It's whole wheat bread. Well, that's what it looked like. It was recycled bread from my husband's office. And I wrote, while all these little kids are running around with snotty noses and bottles, I wrote 7 pages of Stormy Surrender. And Nancy and I and another gal, Linda, wrote the whole book. Except we came up with a story, we set it out, and we were rejected all over New York. But the rejections were so encouraging, I guess, that Nancy and I split up. The other woman had a real job, a good one, and she wrote teen romance, and I wrote regular romance. And we had been reading in the meantime. And she sold a teen romance, her first one out of the gate, and then I sold a longer book, a Silhouette special edition, 18 months later, after a few bangs on the head and ruining the computer or the typewriter at the time. Uh, it was a very, very difficult time. We were broke. We owed the world. I had 2 little kids and I didn't want to be away from them. So somehow we did a lot of research too in the time. There was no Google. There was no internet hardly. So we did a lot of stuff through reading, and we figured out where the market was, and we were able to target the market. And that's how I wrote the first book, which was A Twist of Fate for Silhouette Special Edition, and it came out in 1983, I believe. Since that time, it was just a magical arc, but no, it's more like that.
A Twist of Fate as it related to your career translated into quite a prolific run of novels when that first one hit shelves through the rest of the 1980s, including Dark Side of the Moon, Gypsy Wind, Pirate's Gold, Shadow of Time, Devil's Gambit, Dangerous Precedent, Tears of Pride, Innocent by Association, Midnight Sun, Yesterday's Lies, Zachary's Law, Mystic, One Man's Love, Renegade Sun, Snowbound, Summer Rain, Hurricane Force, In Honor's Shadow, Aftermath, Tender Trap, His Bride to Be, With No Regrets, Double Exposure, Mystery Man, Obsession, Million Dollar Baby, Sail Away and A Husband to Remember, establishing you as a household name in the romance book racks. In the romance book racks at airports, supermarkets, and shopping mall bookstores all over America. When you reflect back on that first era of your now 40-plus year career, what did you take away from those early titles that stayed with you since?
When I got the cover for A Twist of Fate, I just had it on my counter and just, oh, and my sister and I, we would spend the money to frame the covers. Well, that went by the wayside eventually. I learned a lot about story construction and character. I didn't really get character. I was a plot gal, and so was Nancy, but we learned about character. You were very, very boxed in and restricted. No gunplay, no this. And we always pushed the boundaries, which I think a lot of people did. And I was lucky enough to be able to slip in a little suspense because I didn't get the straight romance, and I certainly didn't get the romantic comedy aspect of it. I think I have a great sense of humor, but I'm a more serious person than that, and that's not my cup of tea. Anyway, it was very, very educational. Yes, I learned how to write there. I learned about scene construction, sentence construction, the books, the beginning, the middle, and the end. The most valuable thing I learned, and this was on my own. I wrote always from a synopsis, and I still do. Some writers do not. You learn about, as I said, the beginning and the middle and the end. It's easy to know how to start a book for me, and it's easy to know where it should end up. And especially in those cases, you had to have the happy ending. Now, not necessarily. So it as restrictive as it was instructive. I can write in a couple of sentences the beginning, middle, and end of the book, so that when I get caught writing my book and going off on a tangent, which I tend to do, I can say, wait a minute, what's the main point of the book? And that's always a problem for me. I'm always going off into the wild blue yonder. I find a character that I fall in love with, and oh, we have to tell her backstory. And no. So writing I said I was lucky to be with Kensington because my editor and I can knock out problems in the books. He's very, very good.
You kicked off the millennium with an official transition into romantic suspense, courtesy of what became a signature series within your catalog from then on, with the famed New Orleans series co-starring Rick Benson and Ruben Montoya, an instant hit with fans and critics alike, including popular blog site at the time, MysterySuspenseReviews.com, who after first read concluded that the characters and the sultry New Orleans backdrop all contributed to the suspense in the novels. Nearly all of her works published during that time were terrific romantic suspense novels. This particular series is the one that hooked me on Lisa Jackson, along with well-done, sometimes downright scary serial killers, stalkers, and more. Feature in Hot Blooded, which Reader to Reader Review also celebrated as a fascinating psychological thriller showcasing the tremendous talent of Lisa Jackson. The storyline moves at a seamless, page-turning, exhilarating pace. Miss Jackson has done another outstanding job, intertwining suspense and romance with a superb storyline and wonderful dialogue.
Yeah, that was a lucky thing. I wrote a book called Hot Blooded, where they first appear. And the story was not surrounding them by any means. They turned out to be with the police department, but my editor wanted me to write a book on from New Orleans, and I thought, oh, I've never been there. People there think different than I do. How can I make this work? But the whole feel, the city's so wonderful, of the city was good. And then at the time, people were giving out psychological advice over the radio. And people would call in with their problems, kind of a Dear Abby thing. And these radio people would try to solve the psychological, marital, whatever problems this person had, and all in front of a whole audience. And I thought, first of all, I would never do that. And secondly, well, there's a good story in there somewhere. So that's the story I started there. And then the detectives, I decided I wanted a team, and they just kind of evolved.
Fresh Fiction celebrated a great calibration between you and your sister Nancy Bush collaborating on the Wicked series, where Wicked Ways introduces great characters and has a storyline with a future that will keep you coming back for more. And indeed it did for sequels like Wicked Lies, Something Wicked and Wicked Ways and Wicked Dreams most recently. Coming full circle 4 decades after you each began your respective literary careers after conceiving that first book together. It must have been amazing to finally be teaming up for a full series. And please introduce viewers to The Colony.
The Colony was lots of fun. The Wicked series, Nancy and I have written several books together, but the Wicked series were the start of it, I believe. And Wicked Game was the first book of the series. And we wrote it. We were driving to Silverdale, Washington, I believe, way north from here. And we thought, maybe we should write a series together. Maybe we should do something kind of paranormal. It was the thing at the time. And how would we do that? And so we talked and talked and talked. We talked so much, and we were eating M&M peanuts and Diet Coke, I believe, and drove up I-5. We missed our turnoff because we were so into it. So we had to tassel around and get back to the freeway and then back to where we were supposed to turn off and to Silverdale to the conference. We were still talking when we signed into the room, but then we kind of got into a little bit of a spat, which we never do. I think there's been, well, growing up all the time, but as adults, maybe 4 times in 40 years, maybe once every 10 years. I don't know, something like that. And I just said, I was typing and she was talking and I was disagreeing. And I said, you know what? Slammed the laptop back. I think we need a drink. And that's how I remember the start of the series. And from there, we went on, and I think is there 5 or 6 books now? I'm not good with numbers. I don't know how many books I've written. I don't know how many books I've sold. I don't know any of that stuff. And, I don't really care. But anyway, the Wicked series got wilder and wilder and wilder, and the colony was lots of fun. And Nancy kept track of all of the history of the colony. Thank God, because again, the books were written not sequentially. Each of us did other things in between times. And so it was hard to keep track of that because there was a whole backstory that was very integral. And I think we had written part of the backstory in the book, and Nancy dug it up again. So yeah. So the last of the series is Wicked Dreams, and it ties everything up. And I doubt that we'll go back there, but I never say never because it just never works out. It's crazy. It's pretty wild. A lot of the stories, the Wicked series is about a colony, a group of women that's part of a family, and each of the girls in the family, most of the boys are culled out pretty early, but everybody has a special ESP, special talent, a gift. And so each story is about one of the sisters primarily. They're all around. And it starts with Becca and her visions, and it runs through Ravinia, Olivia, or Ophelia. There's a bunch of them. And it ends with the story where Ravinia is the main character, and she squares off with, a lot of them square off with Good Time Charlie, who is a sicko, psychotic, sick killer that showed up in a previous book. And we thought, well, got to get rid of Charlie, got to bring him back. So he was almost gone in that book. So we brought him back, and he does his business in Wicked Dreams. And the dreams that one of the girls have come to fruition. And we have the big standoff at the end with all of the women and the bad guys, and the end of Siren Song, which is the name of the place where the colony is.
We look forward to airing Lisa's episode in full in the near future on a streaming network, but for now we're excited to talk to her about her latest releases. Your creative wheels have been spinning away creating new stories as rapidly as ever in the past few years. Standalone hits like You Don't Want to Know, Confessions, Close to Home, You Will Pay. Liar Liar, where the Library Journal raved that Jackson's latest is a fabulous, fast-paced, tightly plotted thriller with so many twisty angles, no Vegas bookie would make odds. The author's managing of the past and the present separately is an effective method of clue dangling to keep readers in the dark until the huge OMG reveal. Fans will devour this one-sitting nail-biter. Paranoid, which moved allabout.romance.com to spotlight the fact that it can be hard to find an author who writes the perfect blend of danger, suspense, and romance. But Lisa Jackson has managed to do just that with her latest release. You Betrayed Me in 2020, and The Last Sinner more recently. Please tell fans what they can look forward to in your latest and upcoming offerings.
Finishing the Wicked series, and then the next book that's coming out is The Last Sinner, which is a book that my fan base loves, Montoya and Bentz, and I've written all these other books in between times, so I'm very glad to be back to it. And it connected to the previous book, so that was good. I'm excited, and I got to go back to Christy Bentz and Cruz Montoya, and of course Bentz and Montoya and their little ones, and go back to New Orleans. I'm pretty excited about that. I actually have another book that I've had approved that will continue with the Montoya Bench story. And Nancy and I have agreed to write a book that includes Selena Alvarez and September Rafferty, I think her last name is, of Nancy's, and we haven't written it. The proposal has been approved, and that isn't scheduled yet. So that's always kind of fun. That one, it's always fun to write with Nancy, and these are two of our favorite characters. So it'll be interesting to see how these two detectives work it out.
How does the process usually work for you in terms of who writes what? It sounds like a fascinating one, being sibling co-writers.
Basically, what we do is we write by chapters, or parts of the book. We leapfrog through it, and then if like I don't know something about her character, then I just say backstory here, and go on with the story. Or I just write it and she fills it in later and I fill it in later, because neither of us can possibly know all the little ins and outs of the characters. But we read it separately enough times that it should make sense. I hope. We're counting on that.
What's worked for you to build this kind of lasting career with over 20 million copies of books in print in 20 languages and counting around the world?
I did a couple times think, God or whoever is talking to me, this is not for you, because of whatever obstacle was personal or in my writing career. There have been some real knocks, but I have had my sister. I have my family. Those are the most important things. That sounds so cliche, but it's really true. And so I've had and like I talked about mom and dad, what a base. Many times I say, what would Jack do? Or what would Betty do? Because they were so incredible. And I always think that something better will come of what is happening. And there are some things in life that you can't get over and can't understand and seem unfair, but you're certainly not alone. And I feel like, compared to many, many people, I'm extremely, extremely fortunate, and life is good and life is fun. And I try not to take it too seriously. These days, it wasn't always this way when I was starting out, but they reach out to you through social media. And it's so weird how you share on social media. Oh, the elk were in my yard. And the people, they have raccoons, they have whatever. It's nice to know that they're out there and they've got your back. Yeah, it's great.
Lisa, it's been an absolute pleasure speaking today. Thank you so much for taking out time to be on About the Authors TV.
Thanks for having me, Jake. Have a good day, okay?